Well, hey everyone, welcome back to the Futurmatic Podcast. I have my colleagues here, Det Ansinn and Jesse. Det being our chief futurist, and Jesse being our chief creative, and myself, Gary Zhou, the chief strategist here at Futurmatic. We have some very interesting things to cover today, as around the whole topic with this whole AI disruption that's occurring. It's clearly not a technology problem, even though it's very easy to frame it around that. This is definitely a change management problem. It's affecting everything, as we are the very foundation of everything that we the whole value framework that we've surrounded ourselves about being human, and the value that we deliver to society and so forth. So we're not talking about change. It's not just organizational, but much more personal. We're talking about identity, fear, and why AI isn't just disrupting jobs; it's disrupting how we value ourselves. So this isn't a technical shift, as I've mentioned. It's a behavioral one. So, kind of jumping into the first topic, as far as just like anything when it comes to change management, what are the things that are holding us back? What are we holding on to? And, just call it the simple concept of nostalgia, as a resistance component. Love to kind of get your thoughts about all of this.
Gary, it's dead here. I think one of the things I see constantly is people tend to overestimate their ability to change. And when you see people in disaster and you realize everything's talked about, even a car accident, they're standing at the side of the road, that, it's a lot more comfortable that we have our rituals, a lot more comfortable to have our routines, and that when we get thrown out of them, it's a big deal. And I think, from a leadership management perspective, people tend to underestimate that, or folks overestimate their ability to handle change. Oh, I can handle change. I'm adaptable. I'm innovative. And then when it comes to the rubber hitting the road, you realize that inside of us, this animal that's now scurrying, running around the house and trying to hide in a corner because everything's changed. And where, we all become that new cat in the house that just is hiding under a piece of furniture because we really, there's this minor change, and then there is this massively disruptive change. And hard pressed to really think of a recent analog that ties in like this. I mean, I used to go to the office when I was a kid, and I'd see those secretarial pools, and you see the secretarial pools then get replaced by word processing pools, and then they magically disappeared, and the floor space was reclaimed in the office. I mean, I think there's profound work shifts, but this is even more fundamental than that. This is a shift about everything.
It's funny
Yeah.
when you talk about change because I always like to say like people love change. They're like, oh, I love change. Change is good. Why want to do this? Oh, you meant me. You know what I mean? I was fine with all the other change. Like you want me to change? Oh, okay. Well, I don't know how comfortable I am with that. We do need ritual in our daily lives. It
Yeah.
is what bonds us to other humans. It's what makes time important to us. Those things are important. It's funny when we were home when everyone was home for the pandemic, people are like, oh, we have to get back to the office so we can collaborate and so this. They weren't really talking about collaboration. What they were talking about is the ritual is important. The idea that you talk to someone else and you collaborate ideas. Now, I'm not coming down on either side of work from home or going to the office or whatever. That's for other people to decide. But that idea that, if you don't replace one ritual with something of equal or greater value, then it feels like a loss. And so if
Yeah.
you don't have those water cooler moments, then what happens is you have to replace it with something that feels like that in the change world. It's people. It's that whole. Remember, there was a group of books probably was in the '80s called "Who Moved My Cheese," and it was all
Yes.
about Gary. You're probably too young to remember this. I don't know, but it was a book about how you have to adapt to change, and it was about a mouse who couldn't cope with the idea that someone had moved his cheese from one spot to another. Um, and so, we need those rituals, and
Yeah.
my biggest concern in the AI world is that if you eliminate the friction, if you eliminate rituals, that it's going to feel very hollow for some people. And that's what they're really rallying against is
Yeah.
not necessarily maybe the AI thing, or it can be the AI thing, but the loss of ritual of like how I interact with people, how I
Yep.
measure the passage of time. If I have somebody out there, like if I have 10 agents that are going and making my work effortless, it feels like time has no meaning. Work has no.
So,
Yeah.
I fancy myself as highly adaptable. But when I go into a favorite restaurant and then my menu item disappears here, I'm like at a loss. So I'm ritual is like I want the Thai chicken wrap, and the Thai chicken wrap is gone now. I went here because of the Thai chicken wrap, and we all have that. I think part of it is just having an awareness of the things that go do that. And I've resigned that in my middle age, I'm not going to adapt to the menu changes. I will adapt and change workflows. I'll incorporate AI, but there's there's a ritual aspect of it that we have some dependence upon ritual as humans, and who moved the cheese is one such example.
Yeah. Well, it's the core baseline of what makes us human. I mean, we are creatures of habit. I mean, even research, for example, in behavioral science shows rituals help reduce anxiety. It creates a sense of control in uncertain environments, and they reinforce identity. So we're telling someone to completely change everything. It's a major disruptive factor. I mean, I don't like, same thing as you guys. I mean, I'm a huge techie. I always have been. But like even I find myself in so many circumstances like letting go of old methods of doing things, right? Whether it's interacting, how we interact with AI, things like that. Because it's a foundation we are. We like to build patterns. We like to know when we wake up every morning, this is a routine that we
Yeah,
expect to repeat. But yeah, it's very fascinating because as even though as AI removes friction and unpredictability, it also removes many of the conditions where rituals naturally form
yeah.
because it's so disruptive. It's replacing a lot of that.
And by the way,
So
we
It
like
changes your relationship with the tech. I mean, it really
when we
does.
create rituals, we like to create rituals with other human beings. I mean, this is
Yeah,
why, you pull out your favorite, we just had, my wife is Jewish, we always pull out the same plastic menorah every year. It is a ritual. It's not the greatest menorah. It's like all yellow now. It's brittle, but when we pull it out, it's something it's a ritual that we have with my wife and my daughter and everything else. We like to have rituals, not just for ourselves, but to
yeah,
bond us to other people as well.
yep. There was, there are a lot of rituals you see in the news, also the social media side of how people basically they pull out their phone and the first thing they're doing is checking Instagram or TikTok. And there is kind of an overlap of those digital rituals that it does change even what you're doing there. Josh Johnson, who's this incredible comedian who puts out a new set basically every week up on YouTube, he he said that he felt lucky that he grew up with the internet before social media existed because the relationship you had with those old slow
Yeah.
connections and things that you were doing and exploring, it was very different. And how we relate to that, what the internet means today versus what it meant back in the 90s, is substantially different. It's just here that shift becomes something else entirely.
And there's a difference between ritual and habit.
Exactly.
When we have a habit, it's just a repeatable pattern because of something that has become easy. Ritual we do because it bonds us to other people and marks the passage of time. So there's a very big difference between
Yes.
getting on your phone and scrolling through social media and, cooking Thanksgiving dinner with your family. There's
Yeah. Yeah.
a very humanistic difference between the two of them.
We're recording this right now with two holidays going on, and in case in point, something you expect to happen cyclically every year, and it plays very well into how we operate as humans.
hey guys, did I just disappear for a minute there?
You
You
did. You
disappeared. I,
did.
I thought we were going to make history where the host just
Oh
drops out
man,
of the podcast.
crap! I think I'm gonna restart this because my I don't. This is the first time ever happened to me. The app crashed. The
Yeah, well,
Riverside app
it's
crashed.
safe,
Yeah.
but there you go. You're highly adaptable to change, and you get
There,
tossed
yeah.
out of our podcast here. But yeah,
So much ritual
um,
happened while you were away, Gary.
Man, well, all I can say is welcome back to the Futurmatic Podcast.
welcome back. Welcome,
Welcome back.
welcome. We're welcoming Gary back to the podcast as the intro. But no, I understand that part of the deeper speaking of those rituals and the habits people develop, daily habits, is these are all things that are part of our very, very human mammal experience. And that is something that, when you look at adapting and rethinking things, it's really tough to give up all of those things. And some things you'll cling on to, like that Thai chicken burrito.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
ritual, by the way, is not just a human thing. Elephants routinely
Oh,
go
yeah,
back to the
yeah,
grave sites of dead loved
yeah,
ones. Monkeys will visit trees and put stones in certain trees.
yep,
Higher classes of animals, we all have ritual. And to me, that says that is something that is absolutely needed and inherent into our cognitive
yeah.
function. And we absolutely need those. If not, we would be the only animals that do it, and we're not.
Yes. Yep.
Yeah. Yeah, and sorry I have to do this to guys again because it reset the recording. Just FYI.
Oh, so you didn't
Yeah,
get
it
that
didn't.
recorded? It's still running here on my side. It's still saying running 13 minutes.
Yeah, it's still
Oh,
running 13
really?
minutes on my side too. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, mine's only
So you
showing
might
2 minutes.
yeah, we should be. I don't think we lost anything.
Okay. All right. Good. Good. All right. Let's keep
Yeah.
going. It's meant to be
Good, good,
casual
good.
anyway.
So
All right.
this is it. It's fun when it's the technical people doing a podcast and the technology is not working. So
Hey, it's the
good.
first time it's ever crashed on me, so it's definitely new.
No worries.
Yeah, it's funny
But we got this.
when we talk about ritual and we talk about AI, I need it. So like for me, the first thing I did with, my chat GPT was adjust the personality. You know what I mean? I wanted
Yeah.
I
Hmm.
wanted a certain Gen X for me, Gen X kind of acerbic, dry, sense of humor. I asked it to
Yeah.
name itself Frank. So I needed to have that before I could even start asking it
Yeah.
questions from a 1 and 0 perspective. I needed to know that I could interact with it in a way that was comfortable for me. It felt right for me. A lot of people may not need that, but for me, I absolutely needed to know that I was aligning it with my values and things like that as well, as much as you
I
can
think
at this
most people
stage.
I think most people need that relatability,
Yeah,
Jesse. I think you're really onto something and that meaning of that changes. I mean, I look at the octogenarians in my family, my in-laws that are using AI every day, and the relationship they have with that tech is very different than the relationship that I have with it or
yeah.
that my kids have with it. It's something different because, Notepad or Microsoft Word never asked you what kind of relationship it wanted to have with you. That's it did not. PowerPoint, of course, established the rules right up front that it's going to be,
You weren't
your
best
dark
pals with
master.
Clippy. You weren't best pals with
Exact.
Clippy. Yeah,
You know, Everyone mocks Clippy. Clippy was so far ahead of
Clippy
its
was the
time.
OG man. He was OG.
Yeah,
Yeah, absolutely.
yeah, yeah.
Yep.
Naturally, it was going to be the bringer of our destruction, but it was the OG. And I think, you know, people bash Microsoft the innovation front. There are certain things they've done which are such moonshots. And Clippy was basically this premise 20 some odd years, 25 years ago now, at
Yeah,
least,
yeah.
that they really did a lot of moonshot work. And they had a concept that they showed. Um, it's got to be 30 years ago now that Microsoft showed, which is basically what we're doing right now, talking with video, sharing the documents, all the things we take for granted. I mean, like Xerox and Park did the GUI. Microsoft was ahead of the curve on that. I mean, we have this little Gemini side window and Copilot. It's really Clippy.
It is. Yeah,
Yeah.
it is. It's Clippy.
So this brings us then, following rituals. This brings us to the deeper layer of what's next. The identity cost of effortless output. Now that things are so much easier. So, like the simple question that comes up is, when AI outperforms you, what is left? Where do people derive purpose in a post-effort world? How do we reframe mastery in the age of assistive AI? What do you guys think?
The Matrix predicted it 25 plus years ago. There was a scene in
Yeah.
there that I absolutely love where, they're talking to Neo and they said, "Oh, this whole crappy world that you kind of live in, we had to do that. Like we gave you guys a perfect world and you just couldn't accept it. Like there was no friction. There was nothing there. Like that's why we created this world. You know what I mean? Because
Right.
we gave you utopia and you guys as humans just couldn't handle it. So that's why we had to create this." And I think there's some truth to that because, you can't have a frictionless world, or else what's the purpose?
Yep.
If you don't have the ability to have the highs and lows of success and failure at your job, the joy of discovery, the joy of discovering a solution at your job, the joy of working with a team to affect the outcome. If you're just telling something to do it and it automatically does it, and you don't have to. Now, right now, there's a lot of that joy because, like, for example, when I work with it, the answers are wrong and I have to go back to it. I have to iterate. And when I finally discover it, I'm like, wow, this is so cool. I feel like I've done
Yeah.
something, you know what I mean? But that's not going to happen forever because they're going to get, everything is going to get smarter. And that friction, we're going to understand how to talk to it better. It's going to understand what we want better. It's going to do things better. And that friction is going to go away. And that's what kind of concerns me is how do you structure these things that I just don't log in the morning, tell 10 agents what to do for the day, and then check it back at it at 4 o'clock in the afternoon.
Yeah. I used to, I'm still attached to the thinking that if you can learn and master it in a day, it's not a skill. And there's things like, woodworking takes, decades and such, riding a motorcycle, coding all these pieces. It always felt in that kind of thing where you approached it as the time necessary to truly master it.
Yeah.
And one of the things that AI does is it takes things that used to be years and even decades of mastery and dramatically accelerates it. And I'm kind of looking through my own use of AI as my stages of grief. If you asked me going back in like 23, 22, 23, using LLMs, I had used neural networks, but LLMs, this really elevated the whole usability conversation. I was like always dazzled. I was dazzled and wowed. I was like wowed doing that amazement and the impact. And then you start going into, okay, well, I got that done. Why would it take me more than 2 hours to do that? And the gratification has slipped. And I've gone even the stage. I was in the, like, I'm going to be on the ground in a fetal position because it just did something. It would have taken me 3 months. I did in an hour. Seeing that evolution, that you get some reward out of tweaking, a little bit of magic, but when you have these really well-defined contexts and you got these things running and prompts, you really find that it changes your relationship with work. It changes your relationship with that output. I mean, there is being a hobbyist and painting all the details of the model, doing that together, and then there's getting one of these things. Oh, here's the airplane. Let me put the wings and the tail on, and I'm done. There is a certain level of craftsmanship that you appreciate. I mentioned all those skill things. Those are craftsman kind of things. My brother, who was a technical project manager before he saw the light and he became a home builder years ago, he told me, "Det, no one appreciates artisan code." And so that craftsmanship is there. No one ever really appreciated that anyway. And it just kind of, if your identity is tied to that as your labor, if your identity is tied to doing that thing, we talked about the resistant change, that's where things really start to turn off the rails, because the thing that you identify yourself being really amazing at, the AI and a lot of it, especially in tech areas, runs circles around you now.
By the way, Det, the people who always espouse hustler culture on LinkedIn are cooked because their whole
Yes.
point of being is that I work harder than everybody else. It's not what I'm doing. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's that I'm just doing a lot of it. And those people are going to have to find hobbies real quick. I do want to push back a little bit on myself, actually, because I said that, the joy of discovery of how these things work is in the short term is what kind of keeps me going with it and things like this. I will say, I said to my wife last night, I'm creating, I mean, you can see I do film photography. And one of the things that is kind of the holy grail in film scanning is called RGB scanning. It's red, green, blue scanning. It's basically creating a light source that can capture a film plane in 3 different colors.
Yep.
I was able to, over the course of a couple nights, build and plan and source everything I needed to create an RGB. I did all the theory. And I looked to my wife and I said, I was almost in tears because I was like, finally, all those things in my head that I just put into a folder, I'll never do because I'm just either not smart enough or I don't have the ability to do, or I just don't have the bandwidth to do it. They are all in front of me right now. All those things. I was never going to be able to do this. I was never going to be able to organize and find all the light theory and the LED diffusion theory. And in 2 nights, and by the way, I learned myself, like, what a diffusion panel does, the different, different LED outputs, all of these things that I never would have been able to do before. So the joy of that now being in my head and being able to understand it, when I had basically put it, as you get older, there's all these things that you start putting into a folder. Like, I always wanted to do that, but like, I'm just probably not going to ever learn how to do that. I'm never going to do this or do that. And I'm finding that I keep going to that folder a lot more and being like, wow, I I can learn this. I can do this. This is not something that I just have to put aside forever or never pick up again. Um, that is going to keep me going for a long time. I do worry for people who grow up in this world and always have access to it, that if they don't have that foundation of wanting to know certain things that they never thought they were going to know, if it's always accessible to them, how that's going to affect them and how they're going to respond to it.
Yeah.
You touched on a really key point there, Jesse, is having that foundation. Some of the most effective people I know transforming their businesses with AI, transforming the nature of the work that they're doing, 10Xers, because they have enough experience in their work experience to do this, that they're embracing this kind of change and shift that, okay, I have the background and foundation, that if you're solving every math problem with a calculator, then that, you're not really developing those other skills. And I think there's something to be said for, being a generation that this is new, not dissimilar to Josh Johnson's observation about the internet. I look back when I happen to be wearing my Drexel hoodie today. I'm a alumnus of Drexel. But when I was there in the early 90s, there was this concern that all this use of computing and calculators was getting engineers away from the numbers. So for 3 terms, I had to use nothing but a slide rule to solve that. So I became very proficient in using a slide rule. Does a slide rule, does the number I'm getting from this sound reasonable? And forcing people to think that way. And I think one of the challenges you have with this type of, using AI in these ways is that people don't just read the numbers like, oh, that's what the calculator says. And I'll give you an example. I do advising for different accelerators. We had an applicant that actually pasted in the instruction from the AI that said, here's 1,000-character version that drives home the point. And they pasted that in with their response to the point.
Yeah.
The question. I think there is an aspect to it. And Jesse alluded to this, that you check it and do that slide rule approach versus the calculator.
And by the way, I actually think that you're seeing that now in schools, because before we had you introduce digital things very early into education, because, hey, you're going to have to use these tools to build other tools, because this is where we're going. If you have a tool that just does all that for you, the education isn't about the digital side of it. It's about the tactile, free thinking side of it. And that's why, like, for example, you're seeing all these schools now, the big push is to have them be digital. There's the big pushback on Chromebooks. I don't know if you guys have seen this. They're pulling those out of classrooms. They're pulling phones out of classrooms. Pennsylvania and New Jersey have now made cursive writing mandatory, which as a handwrite, as a guy who collects pencils, I absolutely love. We should teach cursive, not because it's some torture test for our 8-year-olds, but because it teaches deliberateness and thoughtfulness and patience. All skills that are the found work for when you jump into AI, like you say, that will give you something to reason from. And so I think you're going to see, from an educational standpoint, our schools, especially for early kids, where you will see a push to get a lot of these digital assets outside of the classroom, or reserve them for the things where they really do well, helping teachers become more effective, helping them create lessons plans. But for the kids themselves, I think you're going to see a much more tactile push for those kind of things, especially at the early ages.
You're seeing that shift, though. I'd contend that the push on cursive is really more about big pen and big pencil lobbying for more use.
As a big fan of Blackwing, the pencil manufacturer, I'm sure that's exactly what they're doing. Yeah.
So
they got to use more graphite. They have to do longer strokes. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. By the way, I'm a Spencerian script person, not a Palmer. Palmer's for
Oh,
Spencerian is much better script.
There you go. Yes,
so to
that's
your
it.
point about that, guys, all the studies actually showing that as far as the younger generation. I mean, I would have actually initially thought that being in that younger generation called the Gen Zs of the world, they would jump straight into automation and embrace it right away. But if anything, there's more of a what they call a return of friction, for lack of a better word.
Absolutely.
And because
Yeah.
for starters, for example, I'll just kind of name some points from my notes. Is like UX research suggests that over automation leads to disengagement, which is very, very
Yeah.
true. I mean, that there's so many different rabbit holes we can go down just around UX and UI research. Gen Z's, increasingly, valuing, slow, effortless experiences like journaling or something as simple as mechanical watches. Rituals and small frictions reinforce
Yeah.
habits and identity. Again, kind of going back to our previous topic. I mean, it's so which kind of raises a much bigger question for us, in this AI world is designing for slowness in a world optimized for speed, why constraints might be the most human design feature. I mean, what how do we build AI systems that actually preserve meaning for us? Because if we can view you know, friction as a feature instead of a bug.
You have to take a.
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead,
Go
Dad.
ahead, Jesse.
I was going to say you have to take a step back to what you were saying about young people embracing this. And one of the things that I've seen with, like, say, my wife or other people my age that I introduce it to, this is very, very different than all the technological things that we've come up with in the past. In the past, people who are older are often at a disadvantage when a new technology is introduced. I don't
Yep.
understand it. I don't want to, fill my brain with another like way of like how I talk to it and stuff. This is a little bit different because AI, the way we talk about it and the way we talk to it conversationally, if you think about it, really suits people our age and older even better. If you can get around it and learn how to talk to it, you don't have to learn how to, like, download an app and then sign up for this and do all this kind of stuff. Like, like my parents are like, they don't even want to deal with it. But if you just have something you just talk to, that's built for us. We are natural born conversationalists. Younger people, for the ones that I've talked to, there is almost an existential crisis with AI
Yep.
because you've seen with younger people, they're already abandoning online dating. They are getting into things like sourdough or analog cameras. I mean, I have my
Yeah.
analog camera stuff back here. All the analog cameras, the film cameras, they're all being bought for people under 25 years old. They are
I
starving,
heard about that.
growing up in
Yeah.
a digital world. They are starving for ritual, for tactile things. Couple that with the fact that they are entering a job market where this new technology is probably taking, for a lot of them, has the prospect of taking their job before they even get it.
Yep.
So for a lot of them, you might see this as, hey, this is a new technology. Younger people are going to jump on this. And I think that a lot of them will learn it just because they have to, or just because of the inertia of like, it'll be there. But I think there's always going to be this, like, it's like, it's one of the things I have to deal with for older people like ourselves who have always had visions or things that we couldn't do. It's a kind of a godsend. When I talk to older guys, about film, they're like, we don't want to do film. We want digital. Digital's what we always wanted when film was around. Like, we've got this
Yeah.
magic thing now that takes like pictures. I don't want to deal with a dark room and all that kind of stuff like this. That's kind of the way it is with AI. I've got this magic thing now. We'll do all those things that I've always wanted to do, or so this. I think for a lot of people, and it won't be for all, I think there is a fundamental difference in the way people are going to use it from old to young, different generations, that won't correspond to the way we've embraced technology before.
There is an underlying theme
Yeah.
here, that theme of engagement. I mean, the mystery of the film camera is that when you're taking that film camera, you don't know if that was a good picture. And when you're shooting something like, is that worth one of the frames of my film here? Am I taking the scene? Am I worth rolling the dice there? and that ease. And it's not, it's film, it's records, those pieces, even with not other novel, older technology, but even see it in this demand for manual transmissions in cars.
Mhm.
And that is something where people want that engagement. And what we perceive as friction, like if you master things, like it's slowing
Good
me
point.
down, but it's getting you that engagement where, it does offset that I feel like I'm doing nothing. If I'm going down my road with automatic transmission, a twisty road, it's a different experience than doing that. But there is a level of engagement, and that needs to be tied in when you design AI systems. Like I did this system recently, which automates construction estimating, and it intentionally engages the user with questions while it's doing it. Truth be told, it could run all the way through without asking any questions, without making the human
Mhm.
feel some level of value. But by doing that, it does even a better job. It helps train it up, but it gives that level of engagement that you're doing something. And I find this fascinating. I talk to young people, oh, I wish I had that. The desire to have older bicycles. A bicycle, I guess, but that one, because it's not a carbon fiber frame, because it's not that. It's fascinating because there's this desire, and it's not, you know, if I was doing that or Jesse was doing that, you could chalk it up. Oh, that's nostalgia because that's how we grew up with it and we were stuck in our ways. But they're not getting, analog records out of nostalgia. They're getting that because I have to place it down. I have to carefully put the needle down. If I do something wrong, it does it wrong.
I
Where they
can't
could
fast
just click,
forward through a song,
can't
it's
fast forward. I'm
Yeah.
committed to the album.
I'm
It doesn't
committed to
matter if
yep.
track 3 is terrible. I'm committed to listening to the whole thing, and I think that there's that engagement aspect in for a generation wrestling with a complete lack of engagement, everything being done for you. That aspect is so important, and you see it in what people desire and look for. That heck, a popular genre of smartphone is a smartphone that's not smart,
Yeah.
you know. And it's like, look, I got a phone
Yeah.
that does nothing, and
Yeah.
it's done like a treasured achievement. And you know, we live in a world now where I could go put something on streaming and watch whatever I want. I can pull an episode from Airwolf and just do that. I don't have to go and go through a bunch of cassettes. I don't have to go and wait for something to come on. In a world that has so much of that, if you want to look at hope, we don't want to be a bunch of old men. Oh, this what's happened to the young generation. But the great hope is that by seeking out those analog activities, by seeking out the level of engagement, that it's not like we're doomed as a human race. That's recognizing the problem without realizing that you're recognizing the problem, that you need that engagement, you need that. And I know Jesse's interest with the wall of cameras behind him in that, and even these young people wanting old digital cameras, which for me, why would you want that? It's just a lesser version of what you have now. It's all of that stuff that helps, that's encouraging about our future here, and putting effort in things that could otherwise be effortless.
Yeah. Yeah, that's essentially innate in us. The tactile feedback, as we like to say, right? All these little things in between to run up to solving a problem rather than just everything, it just kind of brings to the next topic. And it brought this whole light bulb moment for all of us the other day. And it's the topic around you're the CEO now kind of mindset, as AI is shifting task-based roles toward outcome ownership, but not everyone's ready for that because we want to feel like we're part of that outcome much more deeply, but the question is, are we training workers to think like operators? Not everyone wants to be an entrepreneur, not everyone's ready to be an entrepreneur, and AI is obviously flattening decision making, but are people ready to lead, to be their own
No.
CEO?
No.
No, I
They
know
are
we're
not.
not.
They're not. And remember, everybody, you've had a career. There's not been one job you've been at where you're like, well, if I were the boss, I would blah, 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 blah. Well, guess what? Your bluff is getting called because now you are the boss. And people, it's great to say it like, oh, if I were doing that, because you know what? You never have to do it. You know what I mean? It's always easier to be the critic of your boss or your superior and so this. But now, like, when you have agents working for you, you're directing them. Suddenly, it's you got to put up or shut up. Now you are the boss. You're telling this, and you are literally the CEO of your little fiefdom. you're going to have a job where you're going to have 30 or 40 CEOs working with their bots and everything else like this. And the skills that make somebody a good CEO in the pre-AI world, they're going to be the same skills. That's why companies fail and succeed,
No.
because there are bad CEOs, there are bad
Yep.
managers, there are good ones too, and those are just going to be amplified. But it's not like somebody who works a mid-level job suddenly gets this tool and suddenly, oh, now I can be the CEO. I can it's not going to work that way.
Right.
When Jesse had made, the three of us were sitting on a sidewalk, in a table, having our coffee and tea and talking about this. And Jesse mentioned this. Admittedly, it broke my brain, because the reason being is that watching, and we do all the Futurmatic side, we do all this consulting with these folks and seeing the struggles, is that we are asking people to do stuff with this new technology that they may not be prepared from a professional wiring standpoint in doing that. That there are, the folks that are like, oh, it's not really my job or expertise, I haven't spent time on that. Well, now you have to kind of understand that. You have to develop those skills. And I always, when talking with technical people, I always refer to software engineers as going through something I call software engineer puberty, because your technical skills grow so much faster than your communication and business skills. And the reason I frame it up that way is that I have had decades of managing people. I get to the point where they know all that tech stuff and they feel like they're master and commander, and then they fall apart on some of the basic business communication stuff, basic management pieces that I'd tell them, and I'd coach them. I was like, your technical skills, like, you can go and crank through in a weekend and, hey, look, I learned how to use Python, this Python library, and it's great. You can't do that with how you do your communications in business, how you understand, absorb requirements and do that. That those skills take a longer time to form. They're real skills, not to my can't be learned in a day rule, that it takes time to do that. And what I do when I'm coaching young people on this is that you have to give yourself the grace that you're not going to be good at that right away.
Yeah.
That it's going to take time, and that you have to develop that over time. And one of the great values in this kind of AI, everybody's a CEO mentality, is that if you haven't developed those skills, it's a good time to start focusing on that and putting the same kind of energies you were doing in terms of debugging your TypeScript to really better understand that, because they take longer. It takes longer for you to wire brain do that. And you're going to make mistakes, and like anything else, like any kind of art, everything you're going to do is going to suck at first. You have to give yourself the grace to accept that, give it a go each day, do better with that, and give yourself the patience that it takes time to develop those things. And I think there's an aspect to this. While you could easily just open up a chat GPT prompt, start prompting away and doing your thing and having conversation and engage, the other stuff is going to take much longer for you to do.
AI is just going to make you more of what you already are. If you
Yes.
are a really good communicator, AI is going to allow you to communicate better and to more people. If you don't have the foundation to be a great communicator or a great leader or any of that stuff, AI is not going to suddenly make you, Bill Gates or, somebody overnight. It's not, or, any one of these great, business leaders. It's
Yep.
not going to make that to you overnight. It's just going to amplify what you're already good at and probably what you're already bad at too. So,
Yep.
But that being said, you are going to be the CEO of your little fiefdom. So if you're in human resources or you're in sales, you're going to have digital employees. They're going to be out there all day long doing tasks for you. And if you don't direct them any better than you do human employees,
No.
you're going to get more of it. It might be more accurate. You might get a lot more information, but it's not going to be cohesive. And we're probably going to start seeing that, where one of the things we're going to get is you're going to have employees that are just going to be dialing so much information. People are not going to be able to read it. They're not going to, I
Yeah.
can do 10 times as much. Or like, oh, yeah, but who's looking at that? Who's looking at your 10 times as much? Are you correlating that into like something where people can digest it and everything else? I don't know. So it's just going to amplify for some
Yeah.
people the good and bad of what they already have.
You're going to get bad faster. In some
Yeah,
respects. And
yes,
that's the,
yeah,
Right.
yes.
The general narrative I've been hearing out there, and we've said this many times in our past calls, is framing AI as called the last mile approach, meaning that consider it as something that's there that could potentially take 90% of the heavy lifting, but you're still responsible for that last mile. But that last mile is critical because that's how you're going to own the output. And part of that ownership of the output is now instead of spending all your time with all the heavy lifting, for lack of a better word, whether it's research, whether it's you know, revisions, grammar, whatever it might be, for something when it's communication based. Well, now you can focus on making that message better, making that product
Yeah.
better, making that focusing the last mile for lack of a better word on
Okay,
just refinement.
but Gary, that's kind of I kind of believe that's a false premise because the people who aren't good communicators and have to do that last mile, they'll be like, "Hey, I spent all my day doing this last mile stuff. You know what? I bet you I could automate a lot of this last mile stuff. It just what I mean? People who are
Yeah,
naturally going to do it, they're just going to do it regardless. It doesn't
Yeah.
matter what you try to create. People are going to naturally find ways to do it. People who love to communicate, that last mile is probably going to be last 2 or 3 miles. They're going to touch a lot more of it. You know what I mean? The
Yeah.
people who aren't, that last mile, I just want it to be the last 10 feet. I really don't want to be like, walking
Well,
for a mile. Like I just want,
yeah,
yeah.
I want somebody along me carrying my bag for me for those last 10 feet. Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, I only because I have to. So people are going to naturally fall into whatever is comfortable and easy for them. We can create these last mile kind of situations of what's best, but people are going to naturally fall into them regardless of what they're comfortable with one way or the other.
And regardless of your last mile or some other folks are increasingly using first mile because I'm more optimistic about it, is that you're already seeing the big thing you're seeing with the use of agents is that the sacredness of that last 10 feet or last miles disappearing. And that the part that the human was doing, you're seeing people have agents do that increasingly more. So, I think today there's a lot of value at this moment still in that last mile. 6 months from now, a year from now, I don't know what that will look like. I mean, heck, we could be one model release away from, well, I guess I don't need to be doing that anymore. It is something where, I think it's just a watch this space kind of thing that there's enough changing there.
yeah,
Good point.
yeah. Well, and this brings us to a very, very big topic that's coming up here next, labeled the human premium. Because think about this. I mean, I hate to use economics as a way to frame this, but economics 101, we are, if AI is creating abundance of intelligence, obviously, right? What does anything say? Economics 101, it's going to obviously devalue intelligence. It's so easily accessible and the result for output is so quick. It's certainly going to now change that spotlight to now EQ, that whole I mean, I've always heard of EQ in the past here and there being mentioned, but just the very aspect of everything that makes us human. This actually was mentioned, I listened to the, Lex Fridman podcast with, Jensen
Yeah.
Huang. Towards the very end, the last 30 minutes of the call, they really asked Jensen, like, what do you think is going to be more important for what's going to be the ultimate byproduct of all of this with AI and the abundance of IQ? And he drives so heavily around human compassion, just the whole EQ aspect things, and that's
Yeah.
kind of one of the bullets I made here was around the hustle culture. It's trained us to equate effort with worth, but now we're flipping that. So what do you guys think?
So we're going to see a society where we're going to build artificial constructs around what we value. And by that, I
Yeah.
mean, say you have two companies, okay, and they build widget A and widget B. One
Mhm.
company goes all in on AI. They replace all of their workers, okay? Company two says, you know what? We want to keep a human element. We want to use AI for some things, but we really are committed to workers and stuff to this. What you're going to see is that is going to be a selling point. The same way made in USA
Yes.
is. Now that won't that
Yeah.
there are just some companies that can't do that and they need to be competitive for the cost or whatever it is. But you're seeing it. People are going to be like, why would I support a company that just laid off 6,000 people for AI when I could support another company that does this? I mean, for example, you're seeing all these big tech companies that are laying off people. You know what they never say? that they're laying off people because of AI. They most
Yeah.
certainly are. But you notice
Yeah.
how they tiptoe around it because they don't want the backlash. And I think that if a lot of people start, say, losing their jobs because of
Now,
this, that it is going to be a detriment and a natural roadblock to these things being adapted. They're going to have to find a story around why there suddenly went from 20,000 people to 1,000 people. And that's not, we always assume that everything is equal, that, oh, if I get rid of 19,000 people and company two doesn't, I'm going to be better. You're not taking into account how people are going to react to that societal change, especially if there are people who have lost their own jobs to AI. Are they going to want to support one company that does that versus another? Companies are going to have to find their way around that story.
yeah. Tech and finance shed, the job numbers just came out at the time of the recording. Tech and finance shed 500,000 jobs in the first quarter this year.
Wow.
And I think one of the things when you think about this, that's placing workers, but the differentiator, the reality is if all your potential network of solutions, oh, I just use AI, we use AI, which AI doesn't really matter, is that there's a quiet commoditization that people are engaging in. They don't realize it, that they're making what they're doing as a company less valuable when they don't have those distinguishing elements. I'm an angel investor. We had a company pitch to us recently where they had spent, 3 months vibe coding the solution and trying to get out of market, and they valued the company at $10 million. The problem is that anyone could have just done that coding they did. The AI did all the coding. Developers would have done it in 3 weeks. And that doesn't make for a $10 million valuation. In the old days, if I told you that, okay, we spent $3 million over the past 2 years, once again, effort and work there, like, wow, you've done that. That's a barrier for someone. The barriers coming down and the commoditization really makes it challenging. And where you're really seeing this action right now, there's a few articles on it recently, is you're seeing this in tech in particular. It's one of the reasons why there's such panic in private credit. But you're going to see that in other industries as well as AI gets positioned in that. You're seeing some of that in law right now. You're seeing in finance. That there is a unique human aspect to this and the humans that you have. And I think a good AI strategy removes those rote tasks that don't make you special, that are really commodity kind of tasks. And you stand with what actually makes you special and unique for your team. And, like I look at my amazing Futurmatic compatriots here, we focus on what's in the team because, yeah, you go kick out doing that analysis. There's some human involvement, but AI itself becomes a commoditized workforce where you lose that distinction, you lose that value.
But that,
Yeah.
if you are, I guess my question to that is, if you're a CEO who has a obligation to stockholders,
Yeah.
and if you take the take that you're taking, like, oh, well, I want to reserve AI for this and reserve human stuff for this. If a CEO is there and they can take away 1,000 jobs, you know, uh, you know, and get rid of those things, uh, history has shown us that they're not going to do the honorable thing and be like, well, I
Yes.
want to keep the
Yeah.
human. They're going to look for, "Oh, how many people can I get rid of?" You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's just going to happen. And for us to think that there will be some kind of humanistic circuit breaker that will keep them from doing that, it doesn't exist, and so you're going to see, though, I think the only reason that a lot, we work in this every day. When
Yeah.
every day that I work in, I'm like, I can't believe that somebody hasn't lost their job because of this,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah.
And the only reason that hasn't happened is because, one, companies still aren't quite sure of like how to like implement these strategies. They're not
Yeah.
in the AI business. They're in the plumbing and heating business, or they're a CPA or whatever. They're busy doing their CPA, accountant,
Yep.
plumbing and heating stuff. They don't know how to structure AI in this world. That's the first thing. And
Yeah.
second, they don't want to be the first to do it because they
Yeah.
know they're going to get destroyed reputationally wise if they're the first to lay off all their employees to hire AI. So that's the only thing
Yeah.
that's really kind of keeping that at bay for now. But that's not going to last forever. There's going to be a
I give
company
you
that's going to jump in and
100%
do
on
it.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree 100%. No one's going to make that decision just because, hey, this is that. We saw what happened with call centers and
Yeah.
things, and the call centers, those now offshore call centers are being displaced by AI based tools. You're seeing that. But I think part of this is that there are certain management functions. I think we're within a year of seeing AI being the manager for particular fast food locations. Like your Taco Bell, the shift management product is going to be an AI in a year or so. And the McDonald's being AI. That those
Yeah.
regional manager roles and that, because all you're doing is making sure people are showing up to shifts, doing that. You might still have supervisors around, but the one managing the schedules and doing that is going to be an AI. There's a lot of management functions. And this is the part where it's going to rear its head to your point, that CEO. Yeah, I clipped out all the software engineers, but I don't need those middle managers really anymore because they're just doing an activity that I can fully automate. And the CEOs also think that they're not vulnerable to that. There are businesses out here, out in the world, plenty of businesses out in the world,
Yeah.
logistics and whatnot, that, hey, that role, the day to day role there, could be performed by an AI. And I'm not talking about handing it over to, ChatGPT today or Claude today, but the pieces exist to do that. And there's that epic, which I know we've all seen, the Joanna Stern Wall Street Journal video where they had the AI run the vending machine.
Mhm.
And it's funny, it's entertaining, but when you see the Anthropic person there, that, oh, there's long game here. Thank you for testing. Thank you for doing that. That what seems like out of control and wacky right now, a year or two from now is not.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, that's really
And
good.
it's interesting. I'm just looking at one of the points I made in my notes, around how the new premium, because of AI becomes emotional intelligence, trust, taste, judgment, and human connection. But as I kind of reflect on that, on that note, it's like, but that's always been the case for us. Like everything that we've done in life, everything that makes us human has always been towards, I mean, when you even think about everything that we do in life, like as I'm kind of personally reflecting, yeah, I may be considered a, intelligent person in my field and so forth, but if I reflect back on every single important relationship, that I've delivered work value, I never really recalled anyone that's ever like referenced me from the intelligence perspective. That kind of comes in hand. That's why they're using my services
Yeah.
or reference me. It's always come back to something deeper, like, oh, a personality, relation, things like that. It always drives back to that human connection, no matter what. So, if anything, this will certainly give us the opportunity to kind of make those and reinforce those connections much further.
Yeah.
Because I have more time to be freed up. Like I've said it a few times, and we said this during our last call, guys, where it's like, now that we have some like extra time being freed up, what are we doing with that time? It's combination of whether it's like nature walks, spending more time outside, spending more time with family, doing those type of things.
I think there's an aspect though, is that we all approach that. That's why we're friends and on our Futurmatic adventure. But a lot of people in the world are very transactional.
Yeah.
And you have this where you give one of the things you have now is you get out a proposal something, and you'll never hear from them again unless whatever vendor, you won't know the outcome of what happened. And I think when you understand that it is, life isn't really transactional. A lot of people conduct themselves in business that way. Hustler culture certainly puts that forth, but um, it's those other connections that make sense. I just want to give a shout out to Jesse here, who ongoing inspires me. I mean, I was always good at thank you and follow up emails. Jesse still does cards,
Yeah, he really does.
and
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
but that's a recognition of it means something. In the days of old, if I'm here in Doylestown, Pennsylvania, two square mile metropolis. But in the old days, if I didn't want to go, if I went to the flooring guy and he gave me a quote I didn't like, I'd tell him, okay, sorry, it didn't work out. But because we have a small universe. And I think the challenge you have is that a person, when they're making decisions with vendors and business and clients, is that they approach it, well, there's if I tick off the flooring guy, I'll just hit one of the other 700 I can find on the internet quickly. That aspect of the world that I think, it's my great hope. I don't think it's natural steady state, but it's my great hope that there's greater value and benefit of not being so transactional in a world driven by this stuff. I say that as a hope because I don't think AI necessarily defaults to that outcome. It could exacerbate the transactional aspect, but I think there's a great value in the stuff that is not transactional in this day and age.
You bring up a really good point, and I think you're right because what'll happen is, you know, the excuse that people could use for being transactional was, well, I don't have time to like get back to everyone because I'm busy doing work. If
Yes.
all that now is farmed out and all you have is time, you have no
Yeah.
excuse not to build relationships. You
Yeah.
have no
Yeah.
excuse not to reach out to somebody. In fact, that's what all your day should be. You know what I mean?
Yes.
While your agents are off doing your
Yeah.
work, you should be building the relationships. And this is, I go back to what I said earlier, is there's a lot of people who are built for that, and there's a lot of people who aren't. And
Yeah.
I think a lot of people who aren't are going to have, it is very difficult to build those skills later in life when we're set in our routines and our belief systems. And so the people who are able to reach out, to communicate, to do those things earlier in their life, when we teach those kind of skills,
Yes.
I think are naturally going to succeed. Whereas the people who it's all been about the work, it's going to be, like I said, those hustle culture people who like pride themselves on working 20 hours a day. Man, I really feel badly for them because I don't know
Yeah.
what they're going to fill their time with because it's not anything that we would all think of as fun. I don't know what it'll be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Agreed.
Yeah, I recently had a pretty deep philosophical conversation with a friend about this, and you know, for me, all this conversation has always been driving back to our purpose motive as humans, right? The
Yeah.
why. I recently reread a very good book that I really enjoyed in the past called *Sapiens*. It's basically literally the whole historical,
Yep.
drive through the Homo sapien, who we are as humans. It starts from the hunter gatherer society to the Industrial Revolution, and it really kind of analyzes in detail, like how, from a behavioral science perspective, how much it's changed us, how much it's actually made our lives better. But when you really fundamentally think about it, it's like just everything going back to the hunter and gatherer society. We would go out as groups, go out, hunt, gather resources, and bring it back to our families for pure survival reasons. Obviously, economics, mechanical things within the economics, like fiat currency, have certainly made those processes of acquiring value and bringing that back for survival much easier, right? Made it much more systematic. Hence, why a lot of it can have a tendency to be much more transactional. But when you kind of really reflect back on some of these things, like especially for some people who are like very, very ultra successful, for however you want to define that, people who have already accrued enough resources, for lack of a better word, plenty of money out there, and they always find themselves in that situation of wanting to continue the hunt. They end up, again, I'm going back to that whole hustle culture, that mentality. It's
Yeah.
like I've done this before. Like, no, not I've done this before. I'm doing this right now. I'm making, all these callbacks to old friends, things like that. And like on some circumstances, I'll find like that one friend rescheduling dinner because they found an opportunity to complete a transaction, close a deal, and reprioritize kind of work. And in my mind, as I'm kind of reflecting, I'm like, wow, he's like really obsessed with the hunt, right? It's like you don't have enough already. It's like, and you hear those type of situations create issues in families, obviously, when you're so
Yeah.
so obsessed with that aspect. It's just, and then you end up forgetting about the why you're doing it.
Yes.
Why we're doing all this. Like, has the industrial revolution, has technology really fundamentally made our lives better? Because we're now capable of especially now AI, you're accelerating output,
Yeah.
especially now that we're able to get so much done, so much more. Does that mean we're going to be obsessed with that? I would hope not. If anything, this is an opportunity for us to better really understand why we're actually doing this.
Yeah. I agree. And it's funny, like obviously when we make our time to do this, things that we're doing. I mean, I kind of look at it in a very grim sense. Where I'm at in my age, I look at my fingers and toes, and that's probably the number of good, fun years I have left where I'm not drooling in a chair somewhere or whatever happens. But who do I want to take? Who I'm grabbing lunch with today? Who I'm doing that? I'm I'm making time to making a conscious decision. I'm making time to do that for those people because there are only so many summers left. There's only so many Fridays in April left for an individual. And you want to make that count with the people in the end, because in the end, as we saw in pandemic and the whole world is smoldering, what do you got left? What's the thing that's really important? And there's family, there's the friends, there's everything that ties it together. That's the stuff which, you try to find the roots of what's going on. And in the end, it turns out it wasn't formatting that Excel spreadsheet that you spent 4 hours on. It was these other things.
Yeah. 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 And, our last topic here, I labeled it as change management is soul work. And it's definitely culture work. People aren't resisting training. They're mourning control. That's what's being fundamentally taken away. You know, it's AI adoption through the lens of behavioral science in the sense. How do we make this transition yeah, I mean, I can't say seamless because it won't be seamless, right?
No.
But what makes people actually embrace this change? What are some of those things? We've talked about so many things from tactile feedback, the user experience, things like that. The things the rituals. How do we make this transition for everyone more seamless in that thought process?
I mean,
You don't.
we don't know. Big tech's trying terror. Hey, I'm going to go lay off 8,000 people and you guys better step up your work on AI. That's the message. I mean, there's the terror. We don't know how it's going to work, and we'll see how well that works, and shareholders will see how that works. In some cases, people step up, some cases they don't. We're asking a lot of organizations, Jesse's point earlier, to do things they're not good at anyway. And that's something where you're seeing that. So if I'm here and I'm a CFO and we know we're doing presentation to the board, my solution is, okay, we're going to should be able to just eliminate 40% of the development team and they're going to step up and fill in the blanks. Or what we're going to do is we're going to go eliminate that development team with what things we do need to do. We'll use these folks from Brazil and go from there. There is I think there is an aspect to this that we've spent the past hour talking about all these humanistic things and all these things that we identify with, and emotional intelligence and the engagement thing that through, and then putting that process into organizations not designed to execute or deal with any of that. A human experience in an office is an HR crisis. That's the extent of it. It's not proactive. You're only seeing recently the trend where being proactive on mental health and their mental health issues is kind of change transition, that we're asking organizations to do things, and the kind of change they need to make is not necessarily about buying so many compute units and doing that. There are other aspects here to kind of embrace and do that. And we're not off to a great start with 500,000 jobs down.
And I don't think too, like, for example, management will always want to manage. They will
Yes.
always want to control a story. It's just human nature. It's not a you know a detriment or attribute. I mean, we saw this during the pandemic where some, like on Wall Street, you have to come back to the office, and then everybody quit, and then they're
Yeah.
like, like this. It's like it's the same way with AI. I think that you can contrive to guide it and control it, and not control it, but introduce it
Yeah.
as best you can. But the more you tell people this is how you have to use it, one, it goes against what the whole fluidity of using AI to come up with new solutions. If you tell people exactly what they have to do with it.
Yeah.
Second, I think there's going to be some necessary pain. I hate to say this, but where things are just going to have to develop organically. Some businesses will try AI and it may not work in some regards, but then they'll see, oh, it worked really well here. I think it's like water flowing downhill to find its level. AI will naturally find avenues where it shows worth and where it doesn't show worth. Those things will happen organically. And I think as much as businesses try to control, or organizations try to control it, it will find its own way into our daily lives and our work patterns.
Yeah.
And sometimes it'll be a godsend, and sometimes it'll be a nightmare. And you know, I think management's best course of action here is to be the calm in the storm as these things kind of work themselves out with their workforces or their organizations, to allow these
Yeah.
things to try to happen as painlessly and as um, as productively as possible. But to try to dictate how people are going to use AI, it seems like a losing battle to myself. I don't know. Other people may have
Yep.
different feelings
I,
about it.
I I agree. It's what I've seen. And also something really interesting. It has to think about. I had a discussion with one of our clients this week that they realize that okay, with what the AI is doing here, the folks have much great could actually even more easily divine what our margins are internally. And
Yeah, yeah,
that was a
yep.
realization that, like, oh, it would have taken real work before. Like, okay, here's these things. What's the margins? And then it's a philosophical thing. It's like, okay, do you want to then understand that, understand the costs? How do you want to guardrail that? But also, to what extent do you want to guardrail it? And do you want to share when you're doing, putting some English on the ball in a project? You want them to understand the ramifications of that. And it was really interesting because they never would have considered any discussion around this if
Hmm.
it wasn't for the implementation of AI, that the realization that so much in business is obfuscation, that it's very difficult for you to divine what's going on. And if the AI allows you to get to that answer, how do you respond to that? How
That's
do you
a
deal with
really
that?
good point. It's funny. I think we were talking about this, or maybe Gary, we were talking about this. Is that I could actually see some organizations putting a hierarchy to the quality of the AI that certain people get, because the whole point of AI is like,
Yeah.
hey, let's let it go out there and
Yeah.
do all this stuff. But suddenly, like,
Yeah.
well, I don't want, Joe to have as good at AI as I do because I'm the manager. And
Yeah.
suddenly, if he has the ability to do everything I do, we always talked about, like, during, the last 10 years about the flattening of hierarchy. This is
Yeah.
really it. I mean, because if everybody can do what everybody else can do, suddenly, so the people who are naturally going to be against that are going to be organizations that benefited from the status quo within an
Yep.
organization. We often talk about, like, where IT, you know, uh, whether however you feel about them, if they are been the purveyors of technology in any organization, if that's not suddenly the case anymore, but they're responsible for the implementation of the technology, there's almost y- I don't know what I would call it, but there's almost like an incentive for them to slow walk some of these things in an
Yes.
organization if they feel like they're all part of the organization as at risk. And by the way, it couldn't be just IT; it could be management, it could be accounting. Like Det was saying, suddenly I could figure out the margins on our product, and guess what? The boss is doing really well. I'm not. It's a
Yeah. Yeah.
so it'll be interesting to see how it. I remember when blockchain, when there was a whole lot of discussion about it. I love the technology because I love the idea of, like, it being unassailable. But what a lot of companies were asking us to do is, well, I like the blockchain, but I just want it to be like right here, like with this. I'm like, that's the whole purpose of the blockchain, is that there's all these
Yes.
things that, like, and so you're going to see companies that, like, I love this technology, it's allowed to do this, but I really want to control it. And then when they control it, they kind of, the more they manhandle it, the worse they make it. And it'll be interesting to see how organizations handle the hierarchy of the abilities of these things. You know, at first it's great. I can replace all this. I can do this, and then whoa, wait a second. It's also doing this.
Yeah.
I don't want it to do that. It'll be interesting to see how they handle that.
You have to really accept too what you can control. And one of the things I learned a number of years ago is that every organization, the employees are sharing salaries. There's always a hidden spreadsheet. Every single organization has this,
Mhm.
and if you're unaware of this, it's because you're in management and no one shares it with you, but they all share it amongst their peers. And I first became aware of this because what people were doing when they were filling out a sheet in one of the organizations I was involved with is that people started lying what they were making, both high and low. And I got confronted by these folks saying, "Hey, are you aware that so and so making this?" Like they're lying. Actually, if you're now seeing the sheet you put in front of me, you guys have no idea you're basing this upon trust. Highly comp people were playing down their salaries on the comps. But I think as an organization, I mean, you can't prevent that. I've been executive organization of thousands of people, and they share that stuff. You can't prevent it. So you have to understand how you manage your information, how you do the sharing, and the challenge with the AI is the AI has made some of those things which you thought were deeply hidden, they can now be divined. And there is a business side of this also. And on the same lines, there's discussion now that for all of these healthcare companies and med tech companies, I am a med tech company, but the challenge is this notion of PHI. And then, okay, we're going to anonymize the patients. We're going to keep that hidden. And what's happened is that with AI, you can no longer effectively anonymize the patient data or biometrics. You can't anymore. And this is starting to lurk as a big regulatory challenge because so much of that research was based upon anonymized patient data. AIs can readily go from that patient data and then go and tell you who those patients are. And this is something where we have challenges where things we thought were just, they were secrets because it was too much of a lift to get there. And now the AI helps you get there. And heck, we just saw this in the past week, the news on the new quantum safe keys, because all the old RSA keys are useless with quantum computing because they can crack them in a matter of hours versus many months of traditional computing. So you have to, humans now have the same advantage with a lot of this stuff that's kept above their pay grade in an organization.
Yeah. Yeah. We've covered some great stuff, guys.
Hey,
This has
before we
been
go, can I
yeah.
just make a suggestion?
Oh,
I'm
please.
just throwing this out there. I haven't even talked to anybody about this first. Maybe if we can, end podcasts on either recommendations of things that we're reading or seeing or something like this.
Yes.
I just have one right now. If anybody
Yeah.
has not read it, it's about 9 years old, but it's actually more appropriate than ever. Is David Sacks' book called The Revenge of Analog. David Sacks is a Wall Street Journal reporter.
Yep.
He also wrote a great book on why Jewish delis matter and why we should try to revive them. But in the book, Revenge of Analog, he talks about that the perfect world for him is one where digital processes and analog processes complement each other
Yes.
and work together, and why we need analog processes in our world. It is an amazing book. It's more important than ever. It's a quick read. David Sacks, S-A-X, The Revenge of Analog. Highly recommend it. It's perfect for anybody who wants a great read on why the analog world still matters.
I think, Jesse, that's perfect. Like basically, like the can't let it go kind of thing. The new reads, new whatnot. One of the things I'll close out this one on. We talked about obfuscating things and hiding it. The mistake that Anthropic made that caused all that code to be
Oh,
released.
yeah. Wow. Yeah, that's a big one.
We talk about obfuscating things and doing that. The entire code base for the Claude app got outed by the AI because they made it available in the context. So I think it's great for the Ed podcast on that. I mean, be it new books, the news of the week things, even highs and lows. But I think it's a good way to conclude, Jesse. Good idea. And
Might be a
if
nice segment to add.
anyone listening hadn't caught that story, it's a heck of a story.
Yeah, that
Gary,
was
what about
definitely.
you? Have you
I want to
seen any?
reinforce that book. I mentioned earlier about Sapiens. That's a really good one because
Awesome.
it
Who's
really
the
kind of brings
author?
back your thinking. Let me pull that up. Actually, he's got actually two books. So the title of the book is Sapiens: A Brief History of Humankind
Yep.
by it's
Yuval
kind of a
Noah Harari.
yeah.
My wife read it. I need to get to that one. She read it, so I'm gonna have to give it a fresh read also.
Fantastic.
So
I'm
awesome.
going to pick that up, Gary.
Great.
Awesome.
Well, successful podcast for Futurmatic Squad. Thank you, guys.
Thanks, guys. Looking forward to
Thank
the
you
next
all.
one.
Always a pleasure.
Great.
Always a pleasure.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.